All right, let me make sure the video is recording. Yay, there we go. Welcome to Ben and Walker Movie Show. I am your co-host, Ben Davis. I'm, of course, joined by my other co-host, Walker Holt. And we're excited to have a conversation with you about one of our favorite things in the world, movies. If this is your first time being here with us, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. And while you're here, be sure to smash that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all our latest content. And leave a like because that helps us out a great deal and it helps drive people to our show, and it would absolutely mean a lot to both of us. Uh, this week's episode is different from our two previous entries, but very familiar to those who have been following me before Walker and I came on board together. This is the show that really started it all with me podcasting about movies, where we pick a movie to discuss, usually a movie that is celebrating anniversary of some kind, one that has like a sequel, a prequel, spinoff coming out, one that we really want to discuss or celebrate an actor or director, or one where it's celebrating a holiday, like coming up with Halloween, um, and just do a deep dive on that film where we discuss how we felt about it when we first saw it compared to now. We go over the Rotten Tomatoes score, get into some fun facts, which is, by the way, a section that should be totally taken seriously. Kidding, obviously. And wrap up the show by giving out awards to our favorite scenes, our least favorite scenes, best performance, the Does This Make Sense award, which again, totally taken seriously. And finally, wrap it up with the MVP of the movie. Now that we got that out of the way, Walker, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's good to be here. We had a big storm come through eastern North Carolina this weekend, and it was not a hurricane, but kind of a tropical storm. So we're glad to get through that. No damage, no harms. All good. I was able to keep my tea time this morning on Sunday morning when
Ooh,
we're recording this.
how's that swing treating you?
Oh man, it's a stupid sport. I do not like it. Um, I It's so hard. I keep talking about this every week. If you listened last week, you heard about my woes with it. I stopped keeping score around the fifth hole today because I was already at 600. So I hate it. I almost
You're better
quit.
than me.
I'm gonna need to. I don't know. I It's everything I can do to keep it together out there. It's driving me insane. I'm terrible at it. How are you doing? How's your weekend going?
Not bad, man. Not bad. For those listening, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I am a little under the weather. Uh, I don't know what it is, Walker, but for the past like month, I have been sick nonstop. It started at the middle of August. Had this really bad cold that turned into a sinus infection, and then it went away. And then last week, it was just a really bad cough, really sore throat, had the really bad congestion, and then like I was fine for like 3 days, and now it's back again. It is, it's the worst.
Hmm.
I don't know what it is. I want it to stop. Make it stop. Make it stop.
I'll work on it.
But
Yeah.
thank you. But other than that, it's been pretty good. Had the house to myself with, well, I say myself, but it was just me and Zoe, and this was my first time spending just multiple days with just us two. I was on full dad duty. Carly was out
Oh
of
yeah.
town on business, so it's a lot of fun, man. Had a lot of fun with my girl. She is a cookie monster. She loves those like little Pillsbury Doughboy cookies that are out this time of year with like the pumpkins and stuff on it.
Me too. God, I hadn't had those in a while. Those are good.
Dude, they're so good. They're so good. But we made those together, and she said her first full sentence. Uh,
What was it?
I was like, you're such a little cookie monster because she kept asking for cookies, and she said, "I'm not a cookie monster."
That's great.
Verbatim,
Congratulations.
right?
It's a
Verbatim.
good
It
first
sounded
sentence.
just as clear as that.
It
And I
set you
was like,
straight.
"What?" I was like, "What? Where did that come from?" And I've been trying to get her to say it again, and she's just like, "Nah, nah, dude."
How
But
old is
yeah,
she?
she is 19 months.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, she's a little peanut. But let's move on to our main topic today. We're going to be discussing, or we're going to be talking about the 2013 masterpiece. Yes, I said masterpiece. Prisoners, a film which is celebrating its 10-year anniversary this month. It's a film directed by Denis Villeneuve. It stars Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Viola Davis, Maria Bello, Terrence Howard, Melissa Leo, and Paul Dano.
God.
If you aren't familiar with Prisoners, the plot synopsis reads like such according to Google. And let me look at this here in the very tiny writing. Uh, Keller Dover faces a parent's worst nightmare when his 6-year-old daughter, Anna, and her friend go missing. The only lead is an old motorhome that has been parked on their street. The head of the investigation, Detective Loki, uh, arrests the driver, but the lack of evidence forces Loki to release his only suspect. Dover, knowing that his daughter's life is at stake, decides that he has no choice but to take matters into his own hands. It's a little hard for me to believe that this movie's 10 years old. It's absolutely wild. But
Goes
it's
by
even
so
harder to
fast.
believe. It really does, man. It's even harder to believe that, when this film came out initially, it received very little awards acclaim with only, I think, just one nomination, and it was for cinematography from the great Roger Deakins. And in its defense, I think, 2013 is a very, very good year for cinema. In fact, it's one of my personal favorite years for cinema. But in particular, the awards contenders that year were a lot of heavy hitters. You had films like Wolf of Wall Street, Gravity, 12 Years a Slave, Her, American
Mhm.
Hustle, and Dallas Buyers Club, and they really soaked up all the attention. You know, as many film pundits do, we always like to go back and see what won and kind of reassess, what should have won or been nominated. And I see Prisoners on an awful lot of people's list looking back at 2013 in film. So, Walker, when was the first time you saw Prisoners, and how does it compare to how you feel about it now?
So I only saw Prisoners a year and a half ago for the first time. I did not see it in 2013 or any time in the first 8 years it was released. My now brother in law Jared, we flew out to Texas to for me to meet him and my wife to visit him, and this is before we were married, before we were engaged, and while we were there, he was like, "Oh yeah, have you seen Prisoner?" I mean, just a random recommendation in 8 9 years after it was released. Just like, have you seen Prisoners? And we were like, I don't think I had it on my list. So I keep a list typically of um, both new movies that like I'm trying to catch up on. I haven't seen the new
And
Wes
this
Anderson.
list is absurd. I've
Yeah,
seen this list. It's absurd.
yeah. Maybe we'll release it one day. But it also has parts of like classic movies. Those like the movies that every time I say I haven't seen them, people are like, "You haven't seen Point Break?" And it's like, I'm sorry, no, I haven't seen it. Um, so it was
It's
on
still
that
on.
list. It was just on several It was on several like top lists. I knew, so it was just obviously a recommendation from critics I respect, and when he recommended it, I thought Jess and I would enjoy watching it together. She didn't end up watching it with me, but I really enjoyed it. I liked it the first time immediately. I was like, that's a good movie. I recommended it to her. She it turns out she had seen it. She just didn't
Mm.
remember the actual movie, but I really liked it right off the bat. I was like, that seems like an easy movie to recommend to anybody. Like anyone would like it. And then I watched it again this weekend to prep for the show. I like it way more now. I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic. I I'm gonna be honest with you. I finished the movie and turned to my wife and said, "That might be a perfect movie." That was awesome. Now, I will say, I talked it out. We thought about it. I don't necessarily think it's a perfect movie. It's a great movie. It is an awesome. But when I say perfect, I almost gave it 100 out of 100. But I started thinking of some things through, and a couple things knocked it down a little bit. But all in all, awesome. Loved it. Would recommend it to anyone. can't imagine not enjoy. I mean, there's some intensity in it that can be uncomfortable for people. I can
Yeah,
certainly understand that. I also don't have children, so I imagine watching that. I'm sure you'll speak on it. It's a whole different lens, I'm sure, and I can't imagine it. But from
a whole
from
different
from my
ballgame.
perspective, it I mean, it's it. You said a masterpiece. That's what it is.
Yeah, like so. Unlike you, the first time I saw this film, first time I saw Prisoners was in theaters. It was at Atlantic Station Cinema, and I was it's my favorite theater. My favorite theater is Atlantic Station Cinema. I'm a little biased though. I used to work there. I was like an assistant manager at one point, and this I saw this movie where I was in the middle of my first bodybuilding prep, and I was so hungry. I remember that feeling of going into the theater and feeling so slumped over because all I could smell was like that fresh buttered popcorn, and I couldn't have any of it. And it was the
It's tough.
worst. It was the worst, especially because I worked there. So it was the worst. It was like torture. It's its own form of torture. Um, and that's just a memory that sticks into my brain. But I remember trying to really hard to go see this, but I missed it for like the first 2 weeks it was out, and finally, like on a random Tuesday afternoon, I finally got around to seeing it, and I was completely floored by it. Like I found it incredibly haunting. I found it moving, and tremendously well acted and directed. This is the first Denis Villeneuve film that I ever saw, and also found it very thought provoking. If I remember correctly, I think I had this as my third favorite film of 2013. I think Man of Steel was number one, Wolf of Wall Street was two, this was three. Uh, but just because it was that high on my list doesn't mean I went back to watch it over and over again. There are certain movies that I think are excellent. I think are excellent movies like the aforementioned 12 Years a Slave or Schindler's List that I can really only watch those movies one time and then I'm good.
Yeah, they're
Subject
not.
matter,
They're
it's so dark. It's
yeah, they're
it's
not
so
branded
dark.
as rewatchable. Yeah.
No, no. Uh, eh, but Prisoners is a lot like that for me. I found it very difficult to watch, but I so deeply admired it. And watching it in preparation for today's show, I was kind of a little shaky because I'm now a father of a little girl, like I mentioned at the top of this show, and I could only think of how much this movie would affect me now because you know I would do anything for my little girl, and boy does this film hit harder now as a father. It really does. That said, I don't look at this movie the same as I once did when I first saw it. I just don't. And don't to me this film is less about the links we're willing to go to save our children, which is kind of what the theme I took away the first time I watched it. And don't misunderstand me, that's still there. It's still there, but it's much more about what desperation can do to good people, how we respond to those desperate times, and how we, you know, react when we finally meet our breaking point. What links are we willing to go to, and what parts of our soul are we willing to lose when our faith is tested? And it's beautifully constructed in this film that captures these themes and messages, and that's why I think Prisoners is a masterpiece. It is a movie about reaching your breaking point, and we all have it, and how to react when we meet that breaking point. Um, it's truly a thought provoking question.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. I mean, and another thing this movie does so well, in my opinion, is it just the way it's framed and their house, their family, their car, it all looks so real. Like it looks so relatable. And we're
Yeah,
gonna get into some scenes that it's just chilling how it plays out, and it somehow I don't have children, and it still somehow makes you feel like it's like almost happening to you in the movie. I mean, it and you can just and it's hard to. I mean, it provoked an hour and a half of conversation last night after we finished the movie. I mean, we talked and talked and like, oh, I mean, well, you're not thinking about this, you're giving this person too much credit. You're not cutting this person enough slack for what they're going through. You don't understand, and it's very thought provoking. Um, and a great movie
Well,
to have a conversation about.
the thing is, it's easy to sit there and pick apart how these people are reacting, right? Like, oh, why are you doing that? But like, unless you are in it,
Yeah,
it's
you can't.
it's much more difficult. You don't know unless you are in those situations how you will react, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you really leave this movie, and it's I always say movies are the greatest teacher of empathy, and this is one of those films where there's a lot of finger pointing in this movie, and I think when people get desperate and they're looking for someone or something to blame. And sometimes the only people to blame in this movie are the kidnappers or kidnapper.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, they obviously touch on it throughout the entire movie, and you can't. And I love how they show different reactions. Like Hugh Jackman um, reacted differently than his wife reacted, and they reacted differently than Terrence Howard and Viola Davis. Like everyone had different reactions and approached it differently, and then even a step further gave in and then pulled back. But Viola encouraged. I mean, it just like it and it's fun. Not fun. I mean, it's actually not fun at all. But it's interesting to like take each of these people, and I don't blame one of them. I think all of them reacted
They're
in
all
an
doing what they think is
understandable way.
best.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're all doing what
yeah,
they think is best. And I
yeah.
mean, it's easy to take ourselves out of that situation and go, well, obviously, Detective Loki is clearly the one who's not giving in to, and he does sometimes, and we'll get to it, I'm sure, a little bit later, but he doesn't really, he tries his best not to reach that breaking point. And how
Mhm.
does he react when he does reach that breaking point? Um, he's really
And
the
it,
only one that doesn't really reach a breaking point. Really.
yeah, I mean, kind of. I mean, honestly, and I was gonna say, just kind of on a similar note, is this movie doesn't work without incredible performances either. I mean, they
No.
sell it to you from minute one till the end. I mean, it is chock full of great acting and direction.
Yeah, yeah. This movie is exceptionally well directed, well acted. It's a wonderful movie, and the general consensus of this movie, going ahead to a Rotten Tomato score, it sits at 81%, with the consensus being Prisoners has an emotional complexity and sense of dread that makes for an absorbing and disturbing viewing. And that's true. Like, there is a lot of disturbing things in this movie. There's a lot of complexity to this movie. Like, look, I don't think Keller is a bad guy. That whole speech that Maria Bello gives to Detective Loki at the end of the movie, he's not a bad guy, but he got pushed, and he was a desperate father trying to save his daughter. I just said I would do anything to save my daughter. What
Yeah,
would you do? And you have that one piece of thread that he pulls onto, that one sliver of hope of they only cried when I stopped, or stopped playing, or when I left, or whatever he says. Uh, he takes that one sliver of hope, and he pulls onto it and holds onto it, and it pushes him too far. So
yeah. I mean, yeah. It's the score. Rotten Tomatoes was what 81.
81%.
I mean, I have it higher. I
Yeah,
have it high. I mean, I told you how my knee jerk reaction after the movie. I mean, I was really impressed by it. I mean, I have it in the 90s. I don't exactly. I mean, probably 92. I think 92 out of 100. I mean, I really, really, really liked the movie. It was,
I would have this around a 97,
yeah. I mean, I
97,
think it's a
98.
fair score. I think that's a fair score.
Yeah.
I think it's an elite movie. Um, it's it's suspenseful, it's thrilling. The mystery works well. I loved, and honestly, I liked it more on second view when I knew the ending,
Yeah,
because being able to see these clues laid out throughout and you know sprinkled in, it's done so well. I love the
it's
like,
done masterfully. Yeah,
yeah, and Jess had seen it, like I said, but she hadn't seen it in a long time. She couldn't remember how it ended, and and there was even scenes that like I was kind of like, I started to catch on because I could remember how they were, how, for example, like the Barry's mom, when she's watching the tape of Barry on his big wheel when she's young, and just when I saw that scene this time, it was like, I don't. It just resonated a lot more with me. I thinking about the RV in front of that. We're gonna talk about stuff soon, but I've got it higher. I think the suspense was incredible. The mystery was awesome. The clues sprinkled in. It was thrilling. It was intense. It was heartbreaking. It was messy. It wasn't clean. I mean, it wasn't tied up like a. I
well, like I
mean,
said, it's complex. It's complex, and that's in my example of Hugh Jackman not being a bad guy, but being pushed to a breaking point and giving into his dark side because of where he was as a character. And every single character has that amount of complexity, whether it's the son, played by I think it's Dylan Maroney,
Moretti,
or Dylan Minnette, Dylan
Minette,
Minnette or
Minette,
something. Yeah,
Minette,
Dylan
Minetti. I
Minnette.
don't. Yeah, but 13. Yeah,
Yeah, 13 Reasons Why. He's been a teenager in a lot of movies.
yeah.
Um, but the emotional complexity stretches amongst all the characters, and they all have different points of view. And that's why it makes this movie very interesting, because on each watch, again, this movie's not very rewatchable, but on each watch, you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and relate to it. Again, movies are the greatest teacher of empathy, and that's you know why this movie to me is so good, is because every character has layers to them, where you understand why they are doing what they are doing, and sometimes you agree, and sometimes you're like, you know what, like if I were in that situation, would I react differently? You know,
Hopefully, we never
um,
know.
yeah,
And
I
I mean, I think, I
hopefully
mean,
not.
obviously we know how the movie ends, kind of, or we know what we know. And my guess is, if you ask Keller Dover, um, you tell him how it's going to play out. My guess is he does the same thing again. My
Yeah,
guess is he doesn't play it much differently. Maybe one or two
my
little different things, but my guess is he. I mean, I mean, he's doing what he's got to do. In his opinion, I mean, in his thought, he's doing what he thinks is right because he feels like his hands are tied, and if he doesn't do it, who will?
yeah.
Um,
Well, and then also, like, if he doesn't do it, if he doesn't do that, the case is gonna play out the exact same way, I think. I think,
we
but
talked about it
he was
last
doing,
night. Yeah, I'm trying
but
to, if when because there's because he goes over to the aunt's house once he find. I don't know. I don't know. Do you think it would?
I think eventually the truth will come out.
Okay.
Um, I think eventually Detective Loki would have figured it out.
Yeah, he's never
For
lost.
sure. Yeah. He's never lost, and he doesn't lose. And it's yeah, it's way higher to me than 81%. But I do understand this movie is a dark movie. This movie I don't think is for everybody. I will disagree with you on that note, because it's a type of movie that's so, especially if you have children. This is a parent's
Yeah,
worst nightmare. This is a
yeah, I
parent's
could.
worst nightmare. This is like a horror movie, but like a real horror movie. And that amount of anxiety, that residual anxiety that it would give you, if you were somebody who is a parent, who this is a big fear of yours, and this is a big fear, I think, of any caring, loving parent. This is a tough watch.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
Yeah,
so
I
I
can
could
see
see
that.
why it has an 81%,
Sure.
even though
Yeah,
I
that makes sense.
it's like 97, 98, for me. But let's move into some fun facts, or as fun as they could be for this messed up movie. Detective Loki's tattoos, his Freemason ring, and his facial tics were all Jake Gyllenhaal's ideas, and the facial tic especially, I love as a
Me
nice
too.
touch.
Me too. I did not know this,
The
but I still
blinking,
knew it. I still knew this. I was watching it and I was just looking at like the character choices. And it was like I could just feel that he like ran with this one and loved it. I think he did a great job. I think it's I love the look of the tattoo. I love it all. I think it works perfectly for
the hair is a great touch too. It's
him.
very like 2013, 2014, like it.
Yeah.
Uh, According to screenwriter Aaron Guzikowski, Detective Loki grew up in a boys' home and didn't really have a family. He's a prisoner of his own past with his own demons. And that is something about this movie. The prisoner title is such an appropriate title because
Mhm.
everyone's a prisoner in their own way. Detective Loki's a prisoner to the case. Uh, you have the mom who's a prisoner to her grief, both moms. Uh, and then you have Keller, who is a prisoner to his past, whether it's to the alcoholisms or the things that his father did that are kind of touched upon in past trauma, and then what
Yeah.
obviously what
So
he's doing. He's a prisoner, and then the things that happen with Paul Dano's character. Um, why am I forgetting the name of the character?
it's,
Um,
well, Barry's his real name. Aaron. I can't remember.
Alex Jones.
No. No.
Yeah, Alex Jones is his name. Obviously he's a prisoner, but he's also a prisoner to his fake aunt.
Yeah.
And it's just the list goes on and on and on. Everyone's a prisoner in this movie to something, and it's such an appropriate title.
One thing just on this fact, and maybe people won't like this. I loved that we don't really know much about Loki. I love that that wasn't
Yeah, I do
what
too.
this story was. I mean, real easily you could dive too deep into him. I like that he left it up to the imagination. You know about his track record as an investigator. You know he's got like an eccentric personality. You know he's passionate. You know he's I don't know. Maybe you get the vibe that he's hurt somehow or broken somehow from something in the past. But I love that like it's just kind of up to your imagination. I like when preparing for the roles, people create backstories for characters just for motivation and inspiration. But I too easily it could have thrown another layer that was unnecessary, and we kept it on the story. I respect that. That's not always easy to do. I think.
Yeah, and the thing is you're 100% right. We know all we need to know. You don't need to inject a whole bunch of backstory to this because it's not important. We know what we know. We know that he has, a damaged past, and we can kind of build it using our own imagination. The director doesn't feel like he has to, and the screenwriter don't feel like they have to hold our hand and walk us through it because they don't.
Yeah.
You know,
You're just gonna save it for the prequel,
oh god,
2026.
uh, please no. Uh, to prepare for his role as Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal watched 100 hours of police interrogation footage. I can see that.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
looks
I mean,
very convincing in the. I've never been interrogated by police, but he looks pretty convincing.
I consider Jake Gyllenhaal elite. I think he's next level. I mean,
He's elite.
he's he impressed me many, many, many times watching this movie. And yeah, it shows that he did his research for this role.
Yeah. Uh, Ryan Gosling auditioned for the role of Detective Loki, which later went to Jake Gyllenhaal, a frequent collaborator of director Denis Villeneuve, and a friendly professional rival of Gosling's, being that they often audition for the same roles. Villeneuve and Gosling would finally get their chance to work together in Blade Runner 2049. And similar to Jake Gyllenhaal, I think Ryan Gosling is elite
I agree.
because of their they're somehow both underrated and properly rated in the sense that you talk to anyone, they're like, "Oh yeah, we love Jake Gyllenhaal, we love Ryan Gosling," but like I don't think we appreciate what they do as actors enough. How versatile they are. They're both funny. They're both charming. They're both can be dark. They both can be action heroes. They both can do heavy drama. They can do very serious. They're if you want to look at the wide range, look at Jake Gyllenhaal in Okja, and then look at him in this. It's so different. So different. And then look at Ryan Gosling and something like Blade Runner 2049 and then Barbie
Yeah,
and Nice Guys.
yeah. I mean, they're both great. They're both great. I agree completely about both of them. That said, I really like Jake Gyllenhaal in this role. It'd be
Yep.
hard for me to see anyone else. I mean, he owned this thing from the
Yeah.
look, from the text to the act to every. I mean, I'm sure Ryan Gosling would have done a fantastic job, and I would be saying the same thing if he was in the movie. But I really like Jake in this.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, we got to see Denis Villeneuve work his magic with Ryan Gosling in Blade Runner
Yeah,
2049,
yeah,
which is also another masterpiece.
sure.
Does all Denis Villeneuve do is make great movies? I think that's pretty much all he does.
Yeah, I mean he's underrated. I mean, like, well, he's not underrated. I mean, I think film people love him. I think film people
Yeah.
know how awesome. I mean, I love Arrival.
Arrival is amazing. Arrival is
And
amazing. Blade Runner 2049 is amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
Dune.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Dune, yeah.
I mean, between Blade Runner, Arrival, and Dune, I mean, nobody's doing sci-fi better than Denny. And the issue underrated in terms of he's not a household name. He's not. I mean, I know he's not Steven Spielberg, but like even like I mean, I'm trying to think of the names that like the everyday family knows, and
Christopher
I don't mean
Nolan.
the big movie people. I'm talking like I mean just I could just pick a random family. Like, hey, you know Quentin Tarantino, you know Steven Spielberg, you know Christopher Nolan. I don't know, but I don't think Denny's in that conversation for a
Not
lot of
yet,
them.
but he will be.
Yeah. But I think yes, I think he's an extremely talented director that I hope is nowhere near done making
No,
masterpieces.
I think he's just getting warmed up. Leonardo DiCaprio was attached to the project for a long time, but he dropped out. Uh, I wonder what role he would have been played.
Yeah, I was gonna. Well, I mean, I love
I
Leo
could,
too. I mean,
I
Leo's not
could
underrated.
see,
Leo's a huge star, but I'm trying to.
I could see him playing Loki, but he wouldn't have. There's something about that everyman quality that Jake Gyllenhaal brings to that role, where it seems like a realistic cop. Like I've seen cops that look like that. I say that, but then Leo in The Departed was amazing. So
Mhm.
it's hard. But I could not see him being Keller.
No,
Uh,
I don't think so.
he
Yeah,
couldn't
Loki
bring
would be
that
the answer.
raw intensity.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could do Birch, the Terrence Howard role, but I don't think that would be his role. I think he would, if he was attached to this, he'd have to be Loki or Keller, and between those, he'd be Loki. I think he would do a good job as Loki too.
Yeah, I do too.
I could see him in the role. I mean, again, Jake Gyllenhaal owned it, and and he's sold me on it to where I'm not getting convinced otherwise. But I'm sure Leo would have done a great job in that role.
Yeah, I mean he's one of the greatest actors of all time. So the first time it was submitted to the MPAA, it received an NC-17 rating due to its tone and subject matter. The film's torture scenes were later cut by a couple of frames, along with scenes suggesting pedophilia, and it then received an R rating. Um, I could see that because the nature of the film
Yeah,
is incredibly dark, and it is alluded to with some of the people that he and that Detective Loki interrogates. So there's some pedophilia going on.
I'm sure it was. I mean, it's a intense R. I mean,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, I don't. I mean, some things are tangible, some things are countable. How many times they say the F word, how many times, how much nudity's in it, how many seconds of it, or whatever. Some things are a little harder to put a finger on, like gauging
Well,
the rating on it, but this is, I mean, to me, I mean, just due to like intensity and like and subject matter, like you said, it's just a mature watch. It's not that it's a mature watch for a mature audience. I mean,
yeah, and
it's
it's a different kind of R rating than like Scream 6, you know, a very violent movie. But there's some
or
fun
Porky's
in
or
Scream
something,
6.
right?
Right. There's some fun in Scream 6. There's no fun in this movie. There is
Yeah,
a realness, a visceralness to it, the nature of it, the subject matter. I can understand why it would receive an NC-17 rating and then having to cut back on it. I get it. According to the screenwriter Aaron Guzikowski, the original cut of the film was 3 hours, which I mean, it's not shy. I mean, it's a little shy of that. It's like
what
two and a
is
half.
it? 240.
It's like 2:33 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly
It's,
what it is.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot
Oh,
of
I
torture
nailed
they cut
that.
out. Yeah, it's 153 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
You know it.
Um.
It's fun.
Yeah. That is. Yeah. That I could a lot of stuff that they could probably cut out. Probably some of it had to do with the mom. I could see some of it having to do with Dylan Minette's character.
Yeah, yeah, that would make sense.
A lot more probably with Viola Davis and Terrence Howard, that side of the family, because they don't really spend a lot of time or as much time with them.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. There, it's probably for the best. Not that I mean, Viola Davis is going to steal every scene she's ever going to be in ever. But I mean, not taking away. I mean, again, this thing is just packed full of.
It's chock full with great performances.
Um, but it's probably for the best. I mean, the movie again, similar to Loki's backstory, the movie focused on what it needed to focus on, and it told the story the way it needed. I mean, and it just did such a great job. I mean, I whatever they cut, however they left it, I think is it's awesome. I think it's a great final product they came up with.
Yeah, yeah. We don't need a longer cut. Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bell were set to star, with Bryan Singer directing, but the two actors opted to make The Fighter instead. Though Wahlberg still received an executive producer credit on this film. Uh, I imagine Christian Bell would have played the father. Mark Wahlberg would have probably played the detective.
Yeah, that would
Uh,
have that sounds like it works, but thank God they didn't. I mean now we got two awesome movies with uh, that one's
yeah,
got some all time performances in it too.
yeah.
So
Everyone's
I
cooking
mean
in that movie.
everything's working out the way we hope it would. I mean the fighter's just I mean Christian Bale on that is next level. But I'm sure they would have stole the show. I mean Christian Bale is one of the people. One Hugh Jackman stole this. I mean stole the show with some of the intensity he brings to it and just this distraught look that he has in just his eyes and his voice and his physical nature. I mean, he's so good in it. Christian Bale's one of the people that I could see owning it in a similar way. That I could see like
Yeah,
having a similar result. That being said, I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad he played the guy from Lowell, Massachusetts, and I forgot his name, Mickey something. I forgot his name, but in the fighter. Uh, but I'm glad he's over there stealing that show and left Hugh Jackman to
yeah.
break
See,
sinks.
God, see, for me, like the I could see this cast working. Christian Bale and Mark Wahlberg. To me, it's the director. Like, look, Bryan Singer, the person, they've been accused of doing some really bad things.
Hmm.
And there's plenty of like podcasts and YouTube things and articles that you can read up on that. I won't dive into it. But as a director, um, I think he's to me he's not in the same ballpark as Denis Villeneuve. As a filmmaker,
No,
he's X2 is very good. X-Men Days of Future Past is great. I actually like that movie Valkyrie that he did. Obviously, Usual Suspects, X-Men, but I
yeah,
can't
no. I mean,
see him doing
Denise. But what
like
about then? What about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whenever this was made? Do you think you would have said the same thing? You, I mean, I'm not familiar with Denny's. I mean, I'm looking at his filmography now: Pyrotechnique, Incendies, Maelstrom, and August 32nd on Earth. I haven't seen any of those, so I mean, this seems to be I mean, at least in my world, Denny's breakout.
This is kind of his coming out party.
Yeah.
Um,
Since then, he's been on banger after banger.
yeah, and we didn't even mention Enemy, which is a very good movie.
Or Sicario. I didn't know he. I thought Taylor
Sicario
Sheridan
too. Oh my
directed
god,
Sicario.
I think he wrote it.
Oh, yeah. Wow. I mean, Sicario's great. I mean, that scene
Yeah,
on the border in the in on the on the highway. Oh my god.
yeah,
Yeah, it's another movie. But I mean, since Prisoners, I mean, he has made banger. I mean, Prisoners, Enemy, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, Dune, and then Dune Part Two. I mean, that hopefully that's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven for seven. Hopefully, we'll see with Dune Two. But
yeah.
um,
I mean, I I'm glad that they went. You're right. I mean, a couple of years ago, before you know, but before I knew who Denis Villeneuve was, I probably would have trusted Bryan Singer more as a director because, again, I've seen more of his work. But remove that, it's clear to me. I think they chose the better director. The better director got the better or took the project and ran with it.
yeah.
This film earned Roger Deakins his 12th Best Cinematography Oscar nomination. He had received two more nominations before finally winning his first Academy Award on his 15th nomination for Blade Runner 2049, also directed by Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, it's beautifully shot, and it's always so cool to me. I mean, this movie doesn't. I mean, all movies are better when they're beautifully shot, but this isn't Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner
No.
2049 like needs to be awesomely shot. You know what I mean? This doesn't necessarily need that much like talent in that department. But I love the shot with
Well,
where he's in the box with the eyeball, like with the light.
yeah.
I love that.
To me, it's the shot of all the trees, and then of course the we'll talk about it later, but the car sequence
Mhm.
when
Oh
he's running
yeah,
off in the car. It's beautifully shot. There's
yeah.
something like they're two differently shot movies. This film is shot very intimately, very slowly, very methodically. There's not a shot that is misplaced, and that's not to say that there is a shot misplaced in 2049. There isn't,
Mhm.
but that's much more like cinematic as
Right.
opposed to in big, larger than life, as opposed to this, which is much more intimate. At least I think.
No, yeah, I agree, and I don't mean to discount the work on it. I just mean like it. It's just not when I think of Prisoners, like beautiful shots. It's not what comes to mind for you know what I mean. And theoretically, 2049 that could be what comes to mind first for me. You know what I mean? How these beautiful wide angle shots
Yeah,
and like like it's just certain movies like that's the star of the show. In certain movies, I it might or might not be, but I mean it's fucking it's beautifully shot.
yeah. Completely agree. Beautifully shot film. I love. It's gonna sound weird, but I love the way that it captures all like the pine trees and stuff.
Yeah, well, I like the one that goes through the windshield, and even when I like the scenes in the garage when they're going through the RV and
Hmm.
breaking down the wide angle shot of like a Loki like squatting down, and it just stays on the same camera angle for a long time. I love stuff like that.
I do too. Uh, Last fun fact we'll get here is the original script was set in the suburbs of Boston, but was later changed to the suburbs of Philadelphia and was shot all in Georgia. And you could definitely tell it has that like I mentioned the pine trees.
Yeah,
It has that southern feel because of pine
it
trees.
does, and maybe that's what I liked so much about it because I mentioned earlier it felt so relatable, like their houses, their family, their
It looked like our neighborhood that we grew up
car.
in.
Right, it just looks like what I consider real life. It looks like everyday life for me, and that's what's so creepy about it. Is um, some other guy. I mean, anything shot in the southeast is really interesting to me. Like the Danny McBride guys that shoot a lot down
Hmm.
here, and it's just Los Angeles and New York and stuff are represented so much in cinema and in film that it's a different vibe. I think we mentioned a little bit when we talked about Magic Mike. I think that was shot between South Carolina and Florida, and then things like that when we talked about it with
Yeah.
Jess on the podcast. Something about being filmed around here has this like relatability to me that like resonates so much that makes it feel, I don't know, it just makes it feel more realistic to me. And not that the stuff in LA and New York and the big metropolitan areas aren't realistic or anything. It's just these feel more like home to me, and that just
That's
adds
what you
another
know.
layer to it. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just adds another
So
layer of relatability, another layer of like it hits closer to home, literally.
yeah, and I think that's again that's what makes this story so relatable and feel so real is because it, like you said, and you put so eloquently, it just feels relatable because we grew up around it. And that's just how it feels. Feels very very relatable because of pine trees in the south. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to our awards section, and we're going to start off with the best scenes and moments. Uh, the slow realization that the girls have been kidnapped. This is very well done because it feels so realistic. I just love how it's not this big dramatic thing with this like big loud score coming over, but rather this very realistic approach. It feels very intimate, like we were talking about with cinematography. It feels very like visceral and like, oh shit, like this is real.
Agreed.
This is
I think it's done perfectly. It's one of my. I mean, it's absolutely one of my favorite parts of the movie. It's the beginning of this movie, the first act, just the way they set the stage. I mentioned a lot about the relatability and like it feeling so realistic to me. Like just the look of it felt realistic, but now this part and how it unfolded was I thought perfect. I mean, like everyone is a little concerned, but they don't want to make too big of a deal out of something that's not too big of a deal yet. And then it's like, well, I mean, it seems kind of, and then it just exactly how they. I mean, I just think it's written perfectly, it's performed perfectly. I mean, yeah, it's an awesome scene in the movie.
yeah.
Terrifying,
Uh,
terrifying.
Keller, very terrifying. Keller Dover confronts Alex at the police station in the parking lot. Again, we talked about this a little earlier. They didn't cry until I left them. Uh, when he hears that, and then Hugh Jackman's like performance, as soon as he hears that, and he has to get like he channels his inner Logan, like his Wolverine,
Yeah,
his Berserker rage, and he has to get like held back. And it's like, yeah, I can imagine he would be flipping out because this is a guy that he clearly wanted Steel in custody, and Loki was in favor of keeping him for at least one more day for extra questioning, but they couldn't get him on anything.
yeah. It is a good scene. I the another thing it does is it keeps you hooked and
Yep.
unsure of who the kidnapper is, and it keeps you because they do a really great job of making you believe that out like you almost don't know it's a mystery yet. You know what I mean? You almost think like, well, for sure this is the guy.
Yeah, it does.
And like and you're like, but there's a lot of movie left, so I'm sure there's a little bit extra to it, but we're just trying to figure out how they convict him at this point. Like you're not even sure the ride you're about to take yet. And they do this great job of like anytime you start to doubt um well, maybe it's not him. They're like, "Oh no, it's him." And
They
then it,
do little nuggets of
yeah,
information, and again, it's that this is given Keller something to cling on to and dig his nails into because he has
mhm,
nowhere to turn, nowhere to go. This is where he's putting his hope, and this is where he's putting his faith. And a lot of this movie is about the loss of faith and finding it again in the darkness, and what
mhm,
happens if you don't find that faith. Um, yeah, it's terrific. Uh, Grace Dover reaching her breaking point, and I kind of merged it with Keller capturing Alex. Grace, she's just at a breaking point in, you know, looking for something or someone to blame and to take out her frustrations. And unfortunately ends up being Keller. You were supposed to protect us. You told us you could protect us. Um, and that is the worst feeling in the world, that you are helpless to this and you have someone like pointing their finger at you. But I don't like, the thing is I don't blame Grace, because she's distraught and she's lost her daughter. She's looking for something or someone to blame. I completely understand, putting myself in her shoes, why she feels that way, because she doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to react in that situation. What do you do? You know, and obviously frustration and desperation get the best of Keller here, and that's
Oh,
when he chooses, because he sees his wife just being so desperate, and he sees his son seems so scared. He has that, talk with him in the hallway of, look at me, protect your mother. I'm going to go help the police. But he's really mulling over what he's about to do. And that's when he goes and he captures Alex, um, off of that one bit of hope, with that line of, they didn't cry until I left them. So he is convinced that he knows more. So in his mind, he's doing the right thing, because you got, as a father, you do anything to protect your children. And in his head, he's justified in doing what he's doing, especially after he takes the dog, lifts the dog up by the collar and looks at him. That's, again, little details where you're like, okay, maybe.
yeah. So I mean, I agree. That was well said, because I when we were chatting a little earlier today about what we were going to talk about, I these both these scenes were not in my favorite scenes at the time, but what you just said made me realize how great they actually were and how they worked together. I mean, what she says is devastating, and I mean, I don't like it. It doesn't.
No,
It made me feel terrible to hear it, because I mean, you just know. I mean, as a husband, I mean, I'm not a father, but I mean, I'm sure, like, you just to feel to not only feel that way, but to have it, regardless of what the person is going through, but to have it like brought out that your wife or someone else feels that way as well about you is heartbreaking, and you could feel it in the movie watching it, how sad it was. And but the fact that it's a driving, another driving factor, another catalyst to push him over the edge to go to capture Alex. And then the Alex part, the dog, I hate that shit. I hate stuff like that. The dog, I mean, obviously it's
yeah,
necessary. You're supposed to hate it, you're not supposed to love it. I get it. uh it's just hard to watch, and it makes me feel bad. And then, but it's another nugget, just like I spoke about
yep.
with the comment. Like, it's just another, like, oh well, fuck this guy, it is him. You know what I mean? Like, I and so, I mean, where is that dog? Have we just, do we know where this dog is? We know where this
I,
collar is.
we never saw it again. We
So
don't know.
he's safely, we're just gonna
He could be say
assume Keller
he
dropped
could be,
him off at like a dog wanting family's home. Oh,
hopefully,
yeah,
hopefully. But
and left the collar at home.
the thing is, and here's what I'll say about Grace. In a rational situation, she's lashing out because when something like that happens, you're not, I assume, you're not thinking rationally, and she's just reacting. And as, her husband, I'm sure Keller, when he's thinking rationally, is probably like, okay, she really doesn't mean this. She's just trying to find something and someone to blame, and because you don't know who kidnapped your daughter.
Yeah,
But he is also not thinking rationally, because what parent would in that situation?
yeah.
And
No, I
again, it's the complexity of these characters where, like, they do something like that, and ordinarily you'd be like, oh god, this character's the worst. But then you're like, no, I completely understand their rationale, even if I don't agree. It's a lot easier to say I don't agree if you're not in that situation. But
sure.
what Denis Villeneuve does is he perfectly captures all that complexity, so that, we can see ourselves and relate to these characters in that situation, and not dislike them. We get why they're doing what they're doing. They're doing what any parent would do in that kind of situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the it's definitely shows the uglier side of things, but it it makes a lot of sense for what they're going through in it, and I think it's written well, and Maria Bello, I think it's performed very well too. I mean, it, um,
She's great.
um, yeah, I mean, it's two devastated, heartbroken, and broken in general parents, reacting the only way they know how, whether it's right or wrong. It's
Yeah.
understandable for sure.
Killer tortures Alex. So this is not like, what do I call, like, it's in favorite scenes and moments,
She was sick.
but like, yeah, I know, right? But like, when I think about this movie, this is the moment that I think of. The intensity of Hugh Jackman here is unreal. Like, just beating this poor kid to the point he can't speak. Like, it's already like, we already know he has the IQ of like a 10-year-old, right?
Right.
Like, he just, so you're beating up on somebody that's like that, but you're not thinking of him like a person. And he says that this isn't a person to me anymore. This is someone that has some information about my daughter that he knows that he's going to tell me, and I'm going to get it out any way I can. But it's crazy to think this scene was largely ad-libbed, with Villeneuve asking Jackman to go completely ferocious and him doing so. And it's astonishing how good he is here. Like the smashing of the sink, the "tell me," and he hits the
It
hammer
gives
in
me
the wall,
chills.
and like Paul Dano doesn't flinch.
It's a masterclass.
Yeah,
It's fantastic. It's one of the most memorable scenes of the movie for me. Um, the sink breaking, the hammer in the wall, him leaving it hanging in the wall, the whole Paul Dano too. Paul Dano, I mean, Hugh Jackman's getting a lot of the shine because of he's louder, he's more intense, and
yeah,
like it's obviously he's stealing that scene. Paul Dano's he's doing his role, he's playing his role perfectly as well. Um, yeah, I mean, it kind of gets me like fired up talking about it. Like I mean, you're so tense watching it, and in the moment, like you don't know at that point, you don't know what's happened. Like you still are like, where are these girls? Do what you got to do, and like you're so
yeah.
angry. And then later, in the latter parts of the torture with the shower box or the bag on the head. Oh my god, when she removes the bag off of his head and his face, I mean, it's that's a I I don't even know how to say it. I mean, that's almost like a brave scene. Like you could almost do that scene if like when Viola Davis walks in there to pull the bag off his head. At first, the sink is blocking his head. He's still wearing the bag, and the bag by itself is creepy too. It almost reminds me of
Yeah.
something like a R-rated Batman or something. Like it just it's creepy to me with the bag and the blood and everything like that. But at the beginning, the sink is blocking the side of his face from the camera angle, and I could even see them not showing it and her just showing her reaction, and that being kind of an artistic choice that was impactful for you to use your imagination. So it's almost like a brave shot to show, like to do the practical makeup and like show the results of his and I mean, it looked. I mean, it makes you like weak in the
It's
knees.
yeah. And Viola's reaction there is wonderful. But again, like, you look at the year of 2013 in film, and I'm going to read off the best actor categories, or the best
Mhm.
actor category. You have Chiwetel Ejiofor, 12 Years a Slave, has to be nominated, incredible performance. Leonardo DiCaprio, Wolf of Wall Street, has to be nominated, incredible performance. Matthew McConaughey, Dallas Buyers Club, ended up winning, had to be nominated. He deserved to win, in my opinion. A great performance. Christian Bale, American Hustle, and then you have Bruce Dern in Nebraska. Both great performances, but I would take out Bruce Dern
Nebraska.
and put in Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a that's a great year. Bruce Dern. That's not to take away from how great Bruce Dern is in Nebraska, um, but he is terrific, and especially that scene alone is, again, I think about it. Not It's not something I think about every day, but whenever I think about Hugh Jackman and Hugh Jackman performances, that's the thing I think about.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's an extremely memorable scene, and he's as good as it gets in that scene. I mean, the whole movie is fantastic. I mean, he shows this intensity. I mean, he goes from this everyman to this intensity to, this everyman to this everyman in an extraordinary situation, and he brings this brokenness, intensity, fury. Um, and I mean, it just makes a complete character that is fascinating to watch.
To quote Jim Carrey from Liar Liar, he's a desperate man at the end of his rope. You know, obscure movie reference. Uh, Totally different movie too. Uh, Loki follows Keller to the liquor store and gets caught. Um, the conversation in the car is so believable. Loki is telling him, "Man, go be home with your family. Go take care of your wife and of your son, because that little girl is going to need you when she gets home. She's not going to need whatever it is that you are doing. You are losing yourself. You are losing your family. Get your house in order." But, like people often do when they feel helpless or desperate, you look to blame other things or you try to fill that void. Um, and in this case, it's succumbing to drinking, which apparently has been a problem for him in the past, and then torture. So,
Yeah.
and losing his faith to the point to where there's a part where he's torturing Alex later on in the movie, and he can't even recite the prayer that he was saying at the Lord's Prayer anymore because he's losing his faith.
Yeah, and what's the line? Forgive those who trespass against it, because he can't forgive. I mean, he's.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's like the title, "Prisoners." I mean, you can take it. That was noticeable to me. That the prayer, getting held up on the trespassing. Forgive those who trespass against us, because I was trying to decide in the moment, is he getting held up because he's never going to be able to forgive Paul Dano, if he's talking about him, or whoever is guilty, or is he concerned that
I think
he's
it's
never going to be
himself.
able to be forgiven for what he's doing, especially if, I mean, it's just a deep kind of moment that it was a really nice touch. Um,
Well, yeah,
but I like the conversation as well. It aged well too. I mean, because it really comes full circle at the end. I think about when Hugh Jackman's wife is talking to Loki in the hospital room. And you can just kind of feel. I mean, when he's like, "Yeah, I'll probably go to jail. I'll try to find. I think I'll find him." I don't know. It's not like he's excited. He knows. He feels just like we do. He understands what happened and why it happened. It doesn't
yeah,
necessarily mean he agrees with it or not, but he understands it. But he has the unique advantage of being able to say, like, "Man, I tried to tell him, and I tried." Like, now we're in a spot where the little girl needs her father, and her father's not here
yep,
because he couldn't. And I'm not saying right or wrong. You can't know until you're in this spot, but because he could not, like, whatever he needed to do, he couldn't do it. He couldn't resist what he thought he had to do, and maybe because of that, maybe not. I mean, that's a different discussion. Maybe that because of that his daughter's found, but definitely because of that her daughter is not with her father anymore. His daughter's not with her father anymore.
yeah,
So that, I mean, it's just a deep. I mean, it's a big blow.
yeah. It's a big blow, and it's a terrific scene. Hugh Jackman again, once again, dialing up the intensity, and you know, as I keep relating to this as a father, like the intensity of she keeps wondering why I'm not there to protect her, to save her, and how much that would
Hmm.
weigh on me as a
Yeah,
father
and
if I
he's
could
so
not
angry.
be there. He's so
That's a
angry. I mean,
that's a good
I
performance
get
there
it.
too. I mean, this thing is just packed full of him. I mean, he is good. in that scene. And honestly, with the first time, and even yesterday when I watched it, I remember the liquor scene and the liquor store scene, and I thought that was outside of the conversation. I thought just the way it was played was pretty cool. How he, saw him there, saw him walking away, quickly, re rethought how he was gonna like lie to get out of this. And I honestly thought I believed the sobriety thing. I thought he just I don't know. I thought he was willing to just throw the sobriety away just to hold this lie. Like he was like I thought like he really was 9 years sober, and it wasn't like, even though that's a certainly understandable position for someone to be in with a past, they're obviously in high stress situation, and a lot of people would have trouble and struggle with alcohol during a time like that. But the first time I saw it, I thought I didn't think he was necessarily relapsing. I thought he was just willing to drink the alcohol to get away with the lie, and like because he eventually just throws the bottle in the woods, and but then later his son like is like, I see you drunk every, I can smell it on you every night. So it's like, I guess I don't know. It's
I
not, they
think
don't dive as deep into it, but
he finished the bottle
oh,
as he
did he?
was
I
walking
thought
home
he was
and
just
chunked it
drank. I thought he just got away out of sight of
because
him and just threw it
he
away and
like
was like,
like swaying as he's getting into bed and can barely take off his shoes. He falls down and dreams of
yeah,
his
yeah.
daughter, and
Yeah, I think I just kind of thought that was him just being exhausted physically. I don't know. That was the way I thought of it. I thought it was kind of cool. Like he was just like, I'm not even relapsing. I'm just willing to take a drink to to get him off my back. You know what I mean? And then I thought he would throw away a full bottle, but later, obviously, I realized that he just was drinking.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, the whole scene's very cool.
fantastic. Loki shows the Birch family in Keller the forensic evidence. Again, incredible acting all around, especially with like the articles of clothing and stuff like that. I mean, this scene is it's so haunting. You know, once again, Keller he's put the blame on Loki for this. Like at first, he's so sad and like distraught and heartbroken, and then it goes from that to like rage, and because he's looking for someone to blame and hold accountable, because right now he has no one to blame or to hold accountable because they haven't found who did this. And it's very understandable. But this movie is about people reaching their breaking point. I think this is where Loki hits his wall, because you just see the look on his face when Hugh Jackman, Keller, when he leaves. He's just sitting there at the desk with his head slumped, like blaming himself.
Yeah. No, I mean the scene, and even the scene before that, just the showing the clothes or
Mhm.
going through the photos is such a suspenseful. I mean, not. I mean, I guess I don't know what I expected to happen the first time I saw it, but just imagining yourself in those shoes, just flipping these cards over one by one, and I love just the small details that they throw in, like a pair of blank, like plain white socks that he's like, I don't know, that maybe, and like I don't know, that could be, just like just a sense of instability in how sure we are until we are sure. And I mean it's just a heart-wrenching scene, and I know unfortunately people go through that similar experience far too often, but it's just seeing it play out like that on screen is hard to watch.
Yeah, it's like a knot in my stomach when I watch it. Um, Loki loses his cool, and Bob Taylor commits suicide. Um, this is the frustration point for Loki, man, where he finally loses his cool and he just goes crazy on Bob Taylor because he's never lost a case. He's obsessed. He's a prisoner to the case, if you will. Has to be pulled off of him, but during the scuffle, there's a gun, I guess, that gets taken away from one of the officers, and the guy just blows his head off, and you see the reaction again. Hugh Jackman is incredible in this movie. Jake Gyllenhaal is also incredible in this movie for a different reason. It's the subtlety in the performance and the way that he realizes his mistake has been might have cost what might have cost him finding out where the girls are. because at this point they think that he's guilty, not realizing that it's pig blood. He's pig's blood. He's a copycat. He was um, kidnapped by these people when he was younger, and it just affected him
Right.
strongly. And
Um.
yeah,
Yeah. That scene. You almost took the words out of my mouth. The subtlety. I mean, just. I mean, obviously, when he comes to the realization of everything that this affects and has possibly ruined, but even just the instant reaction, like just
hmm
the startled look, it's such a quick it's such a quick scene, like not just the facial expression, the noise he makes. I don't know how. What's wild is like a 2 second shot of Jake Gyllenhaal after Bob kills himself
yeah, and he tells them to like
is
go
yeah,
get
to
Ian
get yeah,
or
what yeah,
something.
and he just kind of like is scared and sad and doesn't know what to happen. It's so crazy to me that a 2 second shot of him was like one of the best performance pieces of the movie to me. I mean, the reaction he was able to muster up was real. I mean,
Yeah,
it looked real. I mean, it was. I don't even know how you would do it. That's the kind of thing. I mean, that's why I'm talking about him being elite. I mean, he. I don't know how you can. I don't know how you can perform that and not just actually experience it. It was obviously resonated with me a lot. Just that, the clip. I mean, that just it's
that shot. Yeah,
really great.
it's great.
He's great through the
Again,
whole movie, but that just really just it's hard. It just turned real.
yeah. Uh, Loki smashes his desk and notices the necklace and the maze connection. You know, we've all been there where we've hit a wall. Not necessarily in his shoes, but we've all been there where we are just so frustrated. And I just again one of those shots that I always remember from this movie is him picking up the keyboard and just smashing it on the desk in frustration, and then noticing on the floor again. This movie's about like gaining hope, and someone like Loki gaining hope and seeing that little connection with the maze pendant across, um, matching what Bob, this is Bob, yeah, Bob Taylor drew and
Did you
kind of
notice the necklace the first time you saw it on him? Like the necklace um on the body in the basement of the priest's house. I noticed that like the necklace was just like it just felt like an obvious kind of.
the second
It was
time I
just
watched it.
noticeable. It was just and I and then when I saw the mazes on Bob's walls and the ones that he was drawing in the interrogation room and stuff, I like I don't know. I just the scene is unbelievable. I mean, it's a great way to segue into like kind of the final act of the movie of like
Yeah,
of solving everything. And it's a great turning point for Loki at his lowest. Really, and it's obviously well performed as is the rest of the movie. But I just I don't know. I felt like I figured it out before Loki, and I was excited. Like I was kind of like I like noticed the necklace on the guy, and then when he was drawing the mail, I was like, "That's the same as the guy in the basement." And
yeah,
so that was, but yeah, it was a great scene.
yeah. It really was, man. Um, Keller goes to confront Holly Jones, realizing it was her all along. You know, on second viewing, this was clear set up from the get go with that one shot of the toy RV rolling right
Mhm.
to her, right
Yeah,
in camera view. It's
it's a
Denis
little.
Villeneuve's way of telling us, you know, subtly that's her. But the first time I saw it, I really didn't expect it. Like it caught me off guard. Um,
I
but
did.
her reasoning for doing this to all the children that she's done it to, her and her husband, is quite chilling. The fact that her and her husband lost their child to cancer, were devout Christians, all of a sudden succumbed to losing their faith and made it their personal mission to quote punish God by killing these innocent children. It's just so haunting. It's chilling. It's dark. And in this sequence, though, like the you hear that when she shoots Hugh Jackman in the leg after making him drink the stuff and puts him in the uh, little holding cell that she has. It's quite literally it's it's Keller descending into his own personal hell. He's gonna die down there. He just got told his daughter's gonna be thrown down there to him, which is so messed up. And then he sees
Yeah.
the whistle, and he's able to say the prayer again because he's at this point he's at the worst of the worst. And I think he's starting to realize the error of his ways and how he's gone about doing everything. I mean, he's able to recite that prayer again in his darkest moment, which is hopeful, but also it's a very dark scene.
Yeah. I'm bumping it up to 95
You're
just from the
bumping it up
discussion.
to 95.
Yeah, I mean it's a great movie.
It is.
And just and your description of that was it helped me out. Yeah, I mean the scene's incredible. I mean it's just an all-time intense moment. I mean the 2 liter bottle of whatever the hell's in that thing was hard to watch, and then you think about the kids, and you just saw in I forgot the Birch's Joy, the little girl, Terrence Howard's
Yeah.
little girl,
She gets
when
out.
she has like a flashback and you see this bottle, and then you see it again and you start thinking about the kids, and like this Hugh Jackman's a big man, drinking this thing, and it's like, these little girls, I don't know, it just makes it so icky, and yeah, the whole scene's great. I mean, it's great. And
Yeah,
then the car that I don't, is it a Camaro or a Trans Am or something, whatever car is parked over the thing. I feel like that came up, Denny
it came
again
out at the beginning, I believe.
with
He's
like,
like,
I mean, they talked
"Oh,
about
the
like it's for
car."
sale if you want it, and I feel like there was also like other shots of it kind of that were slightly prolonged if you were to rewatch and like notice. Um,
Mhm.
so there was a lot of like little kind of tips and nods at it. Um, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's a terrific scene. And the last one we have here is Loki saves Anna slash drives to the hospital wounded. Again, it's such a thrilling sequence because he doesn't even initially want to go over there, and thankfully he gets over there in time, like perfectly in time. Um, and I'm thinking about it, man. There's a lot of religious overtones to this movie, but like
yeah.
he gets there almost like it's meant to be, like right on time. And she doesn't answer the door. She's about to inject the venom into into Anna. And in fact, I think she gets a little bit in there, maybe, or she sticks the needle in at least. And then Jake Gyllenhaal pulls out the gun and says, "Hands behind your head. Put your hands behind your head. Just don't cremate me, or have them cremate me. Don't have them bury me." She gets off one shot on him, and then he just shoots her very unceremoniously. Like she just gets shot in, I think, the head, the chest, or the shoulder, and the
Yeah, well,
head.
he gets shot in the head. That was a cool little
Yeah,
touch.
it like grazes him, and then he like
He's like
I'm
losing
assuming
it while he's
going.
driving. I mean, that's so tense when he's driving with the blue lights and the stoplights. And honestly, it's the way
He
Market
doesn't even
Street
have the
looks in
sirens
Wilmington.
on.
Yeah, I mean, he's flying. It's so. I mean, in the whole time, I'm like, dude, they're not gonna end this with him like wrecking the car, are they? You know what I mean? And, like you're just like on the edge of your seat the entire time. Um, and you
Yeah,
mentioned it earlier, beautifully shot too. I mean, the colors. I mean, there's this the blur and the red of the blood and the stoplights reflecting off the rain and the blue police light. I mean, just it's an intense, wild ride, literally from
yeah.
her house to the hospital.
Well, they end it at a great point too, because it's just like he gets her to the hospital, cut away. Like he's saying,
They're
"Help,
good at that
help!"
in this. Yeah,
They're they're good at that, and they kind of do a similar thing where Loki finds Alex, hears him screaming or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah. We
finds
don't
him.
need.
You don't need any more than that. And then you see the newspaper article later. He's reunited with his family for the first time in like what, 20 years or something like that. Um,
Yep.
well, that's all I have here. I mean, this was initially a. I try my best to keep best scenes and moments edited down to 10 for time's sake. Uh,
Yep.
this was initially at like 20. This was very hard to narrow down. But I think for me, like if I had to choose my personal favorite scene, a moment, it's the one that I always think about when I think about this movie. It is the first torture sequence, which again, it's like I feel weird calling it my favorite scene. It's not like I'm watching it all the time. It's just it's the most intense. It's the most enthralling. It's the scene I think about whenever I see this movie. That is it. But I think a close second, and it might be tied, is the final two I have listed here, which is the Keller Grizzard confront Holly Jones, realizing it was her all along, and then Loki saving Anna because it's just beautifully shot.
Yeah, all these are awesome. The scene you picked, the beginning of the torture with the sink and the hammer and everything. That's absolutely what I think of when I think of the movie. It's the most memorable thing. Whenever you mentioned earlier, the movie might not be for everybody, and I was a little hesitant when I was recommending it. Sorry, I'm gonna sneeze here in a second. When I was recommending it to my wife, because I mean, she doesn't enjoy watching people get the shit beat out of them. You know,
Yeah,
it's not nobody. It's a hard thing to watch. Um, so it's a great scene. It's impactful to me. I'm gonna. I really liked this. I really respected the scene where they slowly come to the realization they're missing. I thought that was
yeah,
a work of art. I mean, I'm gonna go with that. That got us kicked off in the exact right way for this movie. I thought. So
it's a good choice.
I'm gonna go. But all of them. I mean, you can't go wrong here.
You can't go wrong with any of them. Let us know in the comment section down below what is your favorites. It doesn't have to be on this list. It could be anyone. Um, Worst scenes and moments. I have nothing. I have
I don't
nothing.
either. I don't either. I actually, when
This is
I
one of
told, good.
this is one of those rare movies eh, where I think it's only been a handful where I don't have any. I think Beauty and the Beast is one of them, and I can't remember the other one. It might be like Fight Club or something. I'll have to go back and listen to that, but I can't
Yeah,
think of anything that's glaringly bad in this movie. Like there's nothing. There's nothing. It's a
there's
almost freaking perfect movie.
there's definitely nothing bad. There's definitely not. And I agree. It almost is a perfect. I mean, and honestly, if to be a little vulnerable here, you've kind of cleared up a few things for me too. Like when I was like some of the things, like when I was talking about it bumping up to a 95. Um, I wasn't quite as clear on the motive. I it's starting to all piece together a little better for me now that you're talking about it, and that is one of the things that brought me down a little bit originally from my initial 100. Um, uh,
Excuse me.
um, I don't want to even say anything because there's nothing bad about the movie. I mean, the few things that pull it off of perfect to me. I mean, there's a little bit I feel like I have to buy into a little bit with how much people are brainwashed, and um I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to I don't want to say it's not it doesn't take anything away from the movie from me except for maybe makes it not 100 is like I'm shocked he didn't eventually just talk. He got beat up so bad. Like he
So
didn't
bad. Like,
spill anything. He did know. And like and it's kind of hard for me to believe that he you know people are like, but people are. I mean, Navy SEALs might be trained to withstand torture like that, but like a guy that's it's just that's a little bit like you have to like buy into it a little bit, and that pulled. it down.
He's probably terrified though.
Yeah, I know. It's just he really got beat bad, and like
Yeah.
I like it's hard for me to like. Again, I don't even I hesitate to even mention stuff like that because
And he might not.
it's being nitpicky, and the movie is just rad.
Well,
I mean,
and and the thing is, I say it's almost perfect, but I have no thing that I can pick on here for worst scenes of moments. So it kind of is a perfect movie. It truly is. Like
and that's why
it's
you're at a
a
97, 98, and I'm at a 95. I mean, it's just an awesome movie.
yeah, yeah. Um, Best performance, I think Hugh Jackman wins this one for me, just by a tiny bit.
I know. Yeah, me too. I mean, me too. He's Hugh Jackman's the answer. I agree. I think
Yeah.
he's the best performance. Obviously Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean, the whole movie. Viola Davis is in this movie.
Yeah.
You can't not discuss her. I Hugh Jackman, Viola Davis, Jake Gyllenhaal. They're all Paul
The
Dano.
firing on
Paul
Paul
Dano. I
Dano's
mean, is
in
he
this.
him and Evan
Yeah.
Peters are never going to get another date again in their life? They're just I mean, they just play creepy.
Well, Paul Dano
Uh,
has switched it up recently. He played um
Fablemans, he was good in too.
yeah, the Fablemans. He played such a wonderful dad in that.
You know,
And then of course he's in
the Riddler, he was very
Dumb
normal and
Money.
not creepy.
He's Dumb Money
Oh
coming
yeah,
out.
he's exploding kitten. I forgot the guy's name. Roaring Kitten. I don't remember his handle on Reddit.
Roaring Kitten, I believe. But yeah,
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. But is that out yet?
it's not out yet. I
Mhm.
think in select cities it is, and then it's hopefully my theater will get it. It's currently not showing that it will be here. I think, at least I hope it comes here.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
he's the reason that movie. I think we talked about it one of the weeks on the show that like that's I was interested in that topic when it happened, and the movie aspect of it is a little bit like roll my eyes at it kind of when I hear that they're making the movie. But when Paul Dano's attached to it, I'm gonna get into it and I'm gonna see it and I'm gonna be excited to see it.
yeah, he's always throwing 98 miles an hour. You know, he's always 10 or 110, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
Um,
but Hugh Jackman
but
is my number one. Is my
yeah,
best
same here.
performance.
And let us know, guys, once again in the comment section down below. What is your favorite performance in this movie? Same goes for worst scenes of moments. Maybe there's some stuff in there that doesn't quite necessarily work for you. I would be glad to hear what those are. Uh, Moving on to Does This Make Sense award, which again is kind of a fun category. It's not supposed to be taken that seriously. Uh, do deer hunters usually kill doe? In my experience, no. And that kind of rhymed. But like in my experience, that's not the case.
Mm.
Um,
I don't know. I've never been
usually
hunting. Have you
it's
ever been hunting? I've never been hunting.
like once or twice when, or a couple times actually, when I was a little kid. I used to go hunting with my grandfather, but I never shot anything.
Yeah, I mean we're in
Um,
the minority from Wilson, North Carolina. I mean that was a
mm,
hot place to hunt. I
yeah,
just googled it. I just said, "Can you hunt female deer in Pennsylvania?" And it says when the Pennsylvania hunting season. Wait, the regular firearm season to hunt both buck and doe in Pennsylvania is November 26th to December 10th. So it looks like there's about 2 weeks you can do it.
yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I just in my experience, I think you can, but a lot of hunters do not because this is what keeps.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think a lot of places you can't. I think you're right, though. I think that does sound familiar. I think it probably has to do with population, just like
yeah,
Manetti says.
yeah. Uh, why didn't Keller have his gun like physically on him when he confronted Holly Jones? He just had it. Like I
In the
guess he's
bag.
probably thinking to himself, like he had it in the bag. He's thinking to himself, probably like, well, she's an old lady. I can physically intimidate her,
Yeah, you know that.
kind of underestimating her.
Though that scene, I enjoyed that scene a lot. I mean, obviously it's important to it, but
Yeah,
he, I guess he got I guess when she points the gun at him, it's kind of like, well, what was your plan? But maybe his plan, maybe he. Well, no, I was gonna say maybe he didn't expect her to catch on so fast, but
I
he
think that's
kind of like
probably what it
says it
is.
when
He
he's not
underestimated her.
facing her. He's facing away from her though, and he says like, I forgot what he says, but he says,
If I'm him, I'm not turning my back away from her.
yeah, but yeah, and then once he has the gun pointed, obviously having a gun pointed at you, regardless of how mad you are, there's only so much you can do. But she uses that the daughter card. She uses that to like be like, that's your ticket to see her, and it's like, I mean, now it's like the gun's almost irrelevant. Like he's gonna do anything he can. I mean, he's still the same broken man that he's been for the last 2 hours and 33 minutes.
Yeah, but I do have a question too. He's a, I mean, Hugh Jackman's a big man.
Mm-hmm.
Did he not
Yeah,
think to like, she's old, I'm gonna throw something this way and then dodge that way and then try to get her? I mean, life probably doesn't, real life doesn't work that way. I'm not someone you should probably take advice from when it comes to having a gun pointed at you. I've never had a gun pointed at me, but um,
right.
like, why didn't like those like did that those
Why
thoughts
didn't he
really
just
not
put his
kick in?
claws through her head? I
Elseworld Logan. Um,
oh, I don't know. I think my answer is probably that
your answer is the
what if
most
he did, like,
accurate.
what's the answer is his daughter. Like he
Yeah,
doesn't know where she is. He needs her to.
and it falls right in line too with what has really been his driving motivation the entire film is I will do anything to protect my daughter. I will drink this concoction. I will
Mhm.
do whatever you tell me if you take me to my daughter. Um,
Yeah.
so it's very fitting. And so those two things really, honestly, they kind of work for me. It seems like it was a half-ass plan from the jump because he was running from the police at this point.
Yeah, he also
Um,
it's not like he sat there. Yeah, that's true. He didn't like plan out this like heist. He just went over there and grabbed his tools and like he
yeah, he's like,
barely
"Oh,
even
I'm gonna
it all
fix your
happened
door
really
for you."
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I do have one serious question. Did
Okay.
anyone hear a gunshot when Holly popped off one in a residential area when just a few days ago kids have been kidnapped?
Yeah, that's a good. They do it. You don't even think about it during the movie because like the yard is so just the way their yard is. I don't know. It almost feels like two different. When you see the view from the front of the house, like when he's watching Paul Dano walk the dog, or when Loki pulls in the driveway, and then you see the view from the back of the house with the car and like where the action takes place in the hole and stuff. It kind of feels like two different how like it's almost like it feels like two such different set pieces that it's hard to even once you're in the backyard. I feel like they're off the face of the earth. Like they're in like a remote ranch somewhere. Kind of that's the way it felt. But so it didn't even like ring to me when that happened. But that doesn't make sense. It's a good ad.
Yeah, because I do know that like you show fireworks in like North Carolina or something like that where it's fireworks aren't legal. Like
Yeah.
it's at least I think they're not legal. They're not legal, right? I'm pretty sure they're not.
I have run from the cops when I was like 14 for setting off like you remember like dry ice bombs where you put dry ice in like a Gatorade bottle and like shake
Yes,
them up and throw them. We were doing them at Forest Hills Middle School in like trash cans. Me and like just the guys, Jackson, Frank, and Francis. Everybody we were doing it. It was blowing up, and all
that
of a
makes
sudden,
sense.
like a bunch of cop cars turned on in the Kmart parking lot across the street and started zooming across. We're like, oh shit! We made it like 20 yards. They were like, stop, and they were because the people at like it was behind Harris Teeter, that or the old Harris
Yeah.
Teeter
Oh yeah.
shopping center, and
Yeah.
they called in like reports of gunshots behind the store. and I mean, it was we just went home afterwards, but it was my. I don't even know what your question was anymore, but that just reminded me of it.
You almost shit your pants in that moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I think honestly, I have heard, of hunters killing does. I just, in my experience, it's not really frowned upon as much. The two middle ones, why didn't Keller have his gun on him and confronted Holly Jones? Why doesn't Keller try to overpower Holly? It's very fitting and what's going on in the moment. It's a half-ass plan. On top of that, it's very much in character with everything he's done. She throws out the daughter card, like you said, and he'll do anything for his daughter. He's not thinking about it. But that last one, mm, yeah,
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
good one.
yeah. I think that one goes for an otherwise perfect movie. That is a very, very, very small nitpick. Um, let us know in the comment section down below what's something in this movie that does not make sense to you. Maybe it's us doing this entire podcast and you don't agree with us. Let us know. MVP. This is it's Jake Gyllenhaal to me. He's the
It's either Jake
character.
Gyllenhaal or it's Hugh Jackman, and it's got to be one of them. And one of them needs the prestigious Ben and Walker Movie Show Awards. They both need to be recognized. So if we pick Hugh Jackman for that one, we got to pick him for this one.
I mean, we're better than the Oscars. Come on now. But yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal is to me the MVP of the movie. He is the avatar for the audience.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
is
he's
the avatar
also
for the
just a
audience.
very interesting and eclectic and just a intense character that does not get, like I mentioned earlier. It's not necessary to have like a big backstory or exposition about him and what drives or motivates him. Because his performance is so great, we don't need it because we can just we can get inside his head from the first moment we meet him. I think, and I don't think other people could do that. I think some. I mean, it's testament to the writing, but it more so that perform. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that could pull it off like him.
No, no, I completely agree. I think again, he is the character that I feel like most audiences can relate to the most. He is the character that is tested a lot and is the one that does lose his cool, but it's the one that kind of keeps the faith in the movie ultimately. Um, but at the end of the day, Walker, why would you recommend this movie?
I mean, it's.
Literally
You made a good
everything
point
we.
earlier that it may not be for everybody. I understand that, but I would recommend it if. I mean, if you love suspense and you love thrillers and mysteries, this thing keeps you on the edge of your seat from the first moment to the last. It is masterfully written. I think it's the ride you take and how they leave a trail of clues for you to follow and different things to throw the scent off here and there. I mean, it's just awesome. I mean, it's just a great thrill, and it's we've mentioned it so many times, and it can't be said enough that every performance in this movie. I mean, this thing's it's just A plus in writing, A plus in acting, and when you get the two of those together, it, and especially in an intense subject matter like this, it is so thought provoking, conversational. I mean, I think this movie is just a fantastic movie that I highly recommend to a lot of people. I do understand what you mentioned earlier that it may not be for the like 100% of people, but it if I think it is for someone, it feels like the easiest recommendation in the world. Kind of, it just feels like if I think it's the right match, I think you're gonna really love it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a like I've been saying this entire podcast. I think this is a almost I always hesitate to say it, but it's a perfect movie. I do. I think it's pretty flawless. I think it's perfectly well acted, perfectly well directed. Um, there's no notes, no notes, and it's very rare for me to say that about a movie. I think this movie is pretty spectacular, and it's not one that I go back to watch an awful lot because of its subject matter. It's difficult. It's very very hard to sit there and watch um, a movie that has this subject matter, especially if you are a parent. But it is
Sure.
one that I would highly recommend because it deals with, again, even talking about it out loud, I realize how many religious overtones this movie kind of has. A lot. Um, I just, which really resonates with me. I think this is a terrific film, and I cannot recommend it enough. Uh, I don't have anything else to say about it, really, Walker.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad we got to watch it again because it really kind of cemented itself as like a top tier movie for me this
Yeah.
go around. It put it in like that short list of all times for me. It's just also when something can sneak in there. I mean, it's just a great movie. But, I think that does it
Yeah,
for
I
this
think
week's
I would.
show. Anything else?
I was going to say, I think I would put it above Wolf of Wall Street as my second favorite movie of 2013.
Yep. I'll have to re take a look at it, but yeah, I mean it's definitely up there for me. I mean it's at the top of the decade for me, or I mean it's the top of all time for me. I mean it's an excellent movie. I mean it's up
Yeah.
there in my on my list. But I that's another deep dive in the books for us. Thank you, Ben, for joining me. I thank you all again so much for listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you for watching. If you're catching us on YouTube, we really appreciate the patience with us last week as we figure everything out. Our goal is to bring you great content that you enjoy. We'll be back next week with our regular weekly show, and we'll talk more things movies. But let us know in the comments what you thought of Prisoners. Let us know what you're thinking of our show. Please be sure to subscribe for more deep dives and more movie talk. But with that said, this has Ben and Walker, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.